What would you do if the most feared man in the county destroyed your entire week's work without even looking back? Everyone stepped aside whenever William Harrington, the wealthy landowner's son, walked through town. Everyone except one young baker. She grabbed him by the ear in the middle of the market and demanded an apology. No one imagined that single fearless moment would change both of their lives forever. If you enjoy heartwarming stories about courage, kindness, and unexpected love, be sure to subscribe and join us for more inspiring journeys. A crisp autumn morning settled over Maple Creek, Virginia, as golden sunlight spilled across the bustling market square beneath rows of crimson maple trees. Emily Carter balanced another basket of warm apple pies beside rows of fresh bread and cinnamon rolls, silently praying every loaf would sell before noon. At 24, she was slender with long chestnut hair braided neatly over one shoulder, warm hazel eyes that always revealed quiet determination, and lightly freckled fair skin browned by years of working beside wood-fired ovens. Since her father's sudden death 3 years earlier, she had become the heart of her small family. Every pie she baked fed her widowed mother and 2 younger siblings, waiting inside their modest rented cottage beyond town. She was gentle with everyone she met, yet hardship had forged a stubborn courage that refused to bow before wealth or status. The morning crowd shifted without warning. A tall man in a long black coat walked through the market with calm, measured steps that suggested the world naturally made room for him. William Harrington, 31, possessed broad shoulders, a sharply defined jaw shaded by a neatly trimmed dark beard, thick black hair brushed neatly back, piercing gray eyes, and weathered features that carried neither warmth nor arrogance, only exhaustion carefully hidden behind discipline. After losing both parents within a few short years, he had withdrawn from nearly everyone, devoting himself entirely to managing the Harrington estate. The townspeople mistook his silence for cruelty, and fear followed him wherever he went. Without ever lowering his eyes, William stepped directly into Emily's display. Fresh apple pies tumbled into the muddy street, warm bread split apart beneath polished boots. Cinnamon rolls scattered across the cobblestones like broken promises. He continued walking. Something inside Emily snapped. She hurried after him, caught his sleeve, but he never slowed. Before doubt could overcome her courage, she reached upward, grabbed his ear firmly and pulled. "You owe me an apology," she said, her voice trembling with anger rather than fear. That was a week's work. The market fell silent. Old grocery merchant Frank Dawson, a gray-haired widower whose small produce stall had stood in Maple Creek for over 30 years, nearly dropped the apples in his hands. His weathered face turned pale. "Emily," he whispered urgently, "let him go. That's William Harrington, the landowner's son." Only then did Emily feel the weight of every frightened stare around her. Slowly she released him. William touched his ear, then looked not at her, but at the ruined bread scattered through the mud. After several quiet seconds he spoke. "You are right." He removed a heavy leather coin purse and placed it gently into her hands. "I failed to see what was in front of me. That carelessness deserves an apology." Before anyone could recover from the shock, he bowed his head ever so slightly to the baker who had dared to challenge him in public. 3 days later, William arrived alone at Emily's cottage with an unexpected offer. Harrington Estate's great kitchen had remained nearly abandoned for years, and he wanted Emily to restore it. She accepted only after warning him she would never flatter him simply because he owned half the county. For the first time in years, the faintest smile crossed William's face. "That," he replied quietly, "is exactly why I've come." Emily Carter arrived at Harrington Estate just after sunrise on the following Monday. The manor stood proudly atop a gentle hill, overlooking hundreds of acres of wheat fields and apple orchards, yet despite its impressive stone walls and elegant columns, it felt strangely empty. Every curtain remained tightly drawn against the morning light. The polished hallways echoed with footsteps, because almost nobody spoke above a whisper. Even the servants moved carefully, as though loud voices were forbidden. William greeted Emily only briefly before leaving for meetings with tenants and merchants. His expression remained composed, but unlike the marketplace, There was no hardness in his eyes now, only the quiet fatigue of a man carrying responsibilities that never seemed to end. A silver-haired gentleman approached her instead. "My name is Henry Collins. Henry Collins, 68, had served 3 generations of the Harrington family. He was tall despite his age, with neatly combed white hair, thoughtful brown eyes, and a short gray beard trimmed with military precision. Years of loyalty had made him calm, patient, and remarkably observant. He rarely offered opinions unless asked, yet every servant trusted his judgment. After watching William lose both parents within 4 difficult years, Henry had quietly accepted that the cheerful young master he once knew had disappeared behind silence. He led Emily into the estate kitchen. Dust covered nearly every shelf. Iron ovens sat cold beneath layers of ash untouched for years. Copper pots hung perfectly polished by habit rather than use, while wooden bread paddles leaned forgotten against the walls. The room felt less abandoned than deliberately preserved, as though someone feared changing anything inside it. Emily removed her apron without saying a word. "If no one's using this kitchen," she smiled softly, "then it's waiting for someone." She opened every window herself. Cool autumn air swept through the room, carrying away the stale smell that had lingered for years. She rolled up her sleeves, scrubbed the long preparation tables, cleaned the brick ovens, and stacked fresh firewood beneath them. Several maids paused outside the doorway, exchanging uncertain glances before quietly stepping inside to help. By late morning, flames danced beneath the old ovens once again. The first loaves of bread emerged golden and fragrant. Warm cinnamon filled the hallways. Servants who normally carried trays without lifting their eyes slowed their pace, smiling almost shyly as the familiar aroma drifted through the manor. Emily sliced fresh bread, spread apple butter across each piece, and carried baskets down to stable workers, gardeners, and field hands. Several older laborers exchanged surprised looks. "No one's done this," one whispered, "since Mrs. Elizabeth." That afternoon, Henry unlocked a small storage room beside the kitchen. Inside stood shelves lined with handwritten recipe books, worn mixing bowls, faded linens, and a flour-stained apron carefully folded inside a cedar chest. Across the front, embroidered in delicate blue thread, were the words Elizabeth Harrington. "Mrs. Elizabeth believed food should bring people together before it ever filled their stomachs," he said quietly. "Every harvest she baked with the servants herself. Every Christmas the village children ate here before the family did." Emily traced the stitching with careful fingers. "What happened?" Henry hesitated. "Fever." His voice grew softer. "Master William was only 23 when she passed away. Lord Harrington died less than 3 years later from heart failure. After that, this kitchen closed. So did most of this house." Emily understood without another word. People believed William had become proud. The truth was far lonelier. He had simply stopped allowing himself to love places that reminded him of people he could never bring back. She never questioned him about his grief. Instead, every morning fresh bread appeared outside his study before sunrise. Apple pies cooled beside the dining room windows. Servants laughed more freely while preparing vegetables, and one by one, curtains throughout the first floor remained open instead of being closed again. No speeches were given. No grand announcements were made. Life returned quietly. Several days later, Emily decided to prepare cinnamon rolls using one of Elizabeth Harrington's handwritten recipes. She worried she had crossed an invisible line, yet something inside her believed memories were meant to be shared rather than hidden. The sweet aroma drifted through the manor. A few minutes later, she noticed someone standing silently in the kitchen doorway. William. He had not spoken. His gray eyes rested on the cooling cinnamon rolls exactly as though time itself had stopped. Emily lowered her hands. "I'm sorry," she said gently, "if I shouldn't have used your mother's recipe." William slowly walked toward the table. He picked up one warm roll, broke off a small piece, and closed his eyes before tasting it. For several long seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, he opened his eyes. "Don't apologize." His voice was almost a whisper. "My mother would have been disappointed if no one ever baked them again." He quietly sat at the long wooden table and finished the cinnamon roll while it was still warm. Across the room, Henry Collins stood perfectly still. In all the years since Elizabeth Harrington's passing, it was the first time he had seen the young master willingly remain inside the kitchen long enough to finish a meal. Without realizing it, the coldest room in Harrington Estate had become the warmest place in the house. Nearly a month after Emily Carter reopened the heart of Harrington Estate, the quiet changes could be seen well beyond its stone walls. Fresh bread was delivered every morning to elderly tenants who lived alone. Workers laughed again during their midday meals, and even William Harrington had begun taking breakfast in the kitchen instead of eating alone inside his study. Yet one tradition still remained untouched: the annual Maple Creek Harvest Festival. For nearly 5 years, William had donated generously without ever attending. The townspeople had long accepted that the landowner's son preferred distance over company. Emily refused to accept it. "You can't rebuild a house," she told him one morning, while dusting flour from her apron, "without rebuilding the people inside it." William studied her for several silent moments before giving a small nod. "I'll go." The announcement spread across Maple Creek faster than the church bells. When William arrived beside Emily, instead of in a private carriage surrounded by servants, conversation stopped all across the village green. Mothers quietly pulled children closer. Shopkeepers straightened nervously. Emily ignored every curious stare. She handed William a slice of warm pumpkin pie from a bakery stand before he could object. "If you're going to be here," she smiled, "you'll do it properly." Within an hour, something unexpected happened. 2 little girls began arguing over whose apple pie deserved first prize in the children's baking contest. Rather than allowing the judges to settle the disagreement, Emily pushed William gently forward. "You solve it." He looked genuinely alarmed. The girls, no older than 8, stared up at the tall, serious man everyone feared. Instead of choosing one pie over the other, William calmly tasted both, complimented each child on something different, then suggested they share the blue ribbon because one crust was beautifully baked while the other filling carried the sweeter flavor. Both girls smiled. Their parents smiled too. Later that afternoon, a young boy accidentally dropped an overcooked loaf into the grass. Instead of criticizing him, William laughed quietly and admitted his own first attempt at baking would likely have been worse. The sound startled everyone. It was the first genuine laughter many people had ever heard from him. Standing nearby, Emily realized something important. William had never forgotten kindness. He had only forgotten how safe it could feel. Among the festival guests stood another observer. Charlotte Whitmore, 28, was the elegant daughter of Nathaniel Whitmore, the wealthiest banker in the county. She possessed striking blonde hair arranged beneath an expensive hat, graceful posture, pale, flawless skin, and sharp blue eyes that rarely revealed genuine warmth. Raised among privilege and constant admiration, Charlotte had learned to mistake admiration for affection. For years, she believed marriage between herself and William would unite the county's greatest fortune with its largest estate. She never imagined someone as ordinary as a baker could become her rival. She watched William smiling beside Emily. Jealousy settled quietly behind her polished manners. Several days later, a young woman arrived at Harrington Estate carrying an impressive recommendation letter. She introduced herself as Lucy Parker. Lucy Parker, 22, was petite with straight brown hair tucked beneath a plain servant's cap, nervous green eyes, and soft features that made her appear harmless. She spoke politely, worked efficiently, and avoided unnecessary conversation. Henry accepted the recommendation without suspicion, believing she had previously worked for a respected household nearby. Emily welcomed her warmly into the kitchen. The first formal dinner hosted by William in years arrived soon afterward. Neighboring landowners, merchants, church leaders, and respected families gathered inside the restored dining room. Emily supervised every dish personally, finishing a delicate apple cream tart that quickly became the evening's favorite dessert. The celebration ended abruptly. One guest collapsed after eating. The physician soon discovered poisonous wild berries hidden carefully inside the dessert filling. The room erupted with fear. Because Emily alone had prepared the pastries, whispers spread almost immediately. The baker poisoned them. By sunrise, the rumor had reached nearly every corner of Maple Creek. Emily stood silently inside the great hall while servants avoided her eyes. Only William refused to step away. "I know she didn't do this," he said firmly. Henry searched employment records while William questioned every servant personally. During the investigation, another familiar face stepped forward. Samuel Green, the estate's elderly head gardener, was 65, broad-shouldered despite his age, with weathered bronze skin, thick gray eyebrows, and rough hands hardened of tending orchards and gardens, honest almost to a fault. Samuel rarely involved himself in household matters, but he clearly remembered seeing Lucy leave the pantry alone much earlier than anyone else that morning. Before long, a local carriage driver added another piece of evidence. He had transported Lucy to a quiet crossroads 2 days before the dinner, where she secretly met Charlotte Whitmore's personal maid. William personally examined Lucy's recommendation letter. The signature appeared genuine. The family seal did not. It had been forged. Faced with the evidence, Lucy finally confessed. Charlotte had promised her enough money to leave Virginia forever if Emily were blamed for poisoning one of the guests and dismissed from Harrington Estate in disgrace. Emily's name was cleared before sunset. After everyone else had gone home, she quietly asked William the question that had remained in her heart all day. "Why did you believe me when almost no one else did?" William looked directly into her eyes. "They only know the baker who sells bread." He paused. "I know the woman whose honesty brought life back into this house." For reasons Emily could not explain, those words touched her more deeply than any declaration she had ever imagined hearing. Only then did she realize that William Harrington had become far more important to her than she had ever intended. Nearly a month passed after Emily Carter's name had been cleared, and life at Harrington Estate settled into a quiet rhythm, unlike anything William Harrington had known in years. The kitchen remained warm from sunrise until evening. Laughter drifted through hallways once ruled by silence, and workers no longer lowered their voices whenever the master's footsteps approached. Emily had unknowingly transformed the estate simply by treating every person with the same kindness she carried into the marketplace each morning. Late one October afternoon, Emily prepared to visit a small orchard nearly 30 miles west of Maple Creek. An elderly grower there had promised to sell her a rare variety of apples whose rich sweetness lasted through the winter months, making them perfect for pies served during Christmas gatherings. She left before dawn with a small wagon, promising Henry Collins she would return before nightfall. The old orchard belonged to Benjamin Turner, a 70-year-old widower whose broad shoulders had long since bent beneath decades of honest labor. His thick white beard reached nearly to his chest, while gentle blue eyes still carried the warmth of a man who loved sharing knowledge more than earning profit. Since losing his wife several winters earlier, Benjamin had devoted himself entirely to preserving heirloom fruit trees that many larger farms no longer cared to grow. Before Emily departed, he carefully wrapped the precious apples inside thick blankets and warned her about dark clouds gathering beyond the western hills. His warning proved correct. By late afternoon, the clear autumn sky disappeared beneath heavy black clouds. Fierce winds swept across open fields, rain fell sideways, and the narrow dirt road became a river of thick mud. Emily urged her horse forward carefully, but one wheel slid into a deep rut hidden beneath the water. The axle cracked with a sharp snap. The frightened horse eventually pulled itself free. The damaged wagon did not. Unable to repair it before darkness, Emily gathered the blankets of apples, calmed the trembling horse, and slowly walked toward the only light she could see through the storm, a lonely roadside inn standing at a crossroads nearly 2 miles away. The White Oak Inn was already crowded with stranded travelers. A young mother held a sleeping infant close beneath a wool blanket, while 2 elderly merchants dried their coats beside the fire. Emily immediately forgot her own discomfort. She found warm milk for the baby, helped the exhausted innkeeper prepare soup for everyone sheltering there, and comforted frightened children whenever thunder shook the windows. Far away, Harrington Estate received alarming news. Emily's horse had returned home alone, dragging broken leather harness behind it. William needed no further explanation. Within minutes he had saddled his own horse. Henry, Samuel Green, and 4 estate riders insisted on joining him, but William rode ahead of everyone, searching flooded roads, abandoned barns, and narrow wooden bridges one after another, despite rain that soaked him to the bone. Every passing mile carried only one unbearable thought. Not again. He had already buried both parents. He refused to lose Emily, too. It was nearly midnight when he spotted lantern light shining through the windows of the White Oak Inn. The front door burst open. Emily looked up in surprise. William crossed the room before anyone could speak, his dark hair plastered against his forehead by rain, water streaming from his black coat. His usually calm gray eyes searched her face desperately. "Are you hurt?" She blinked. No. He held both of her shoulders firmly, almost afraid she might disappear if he let go. "Did you fall?" "I'm only wet. Did anyone harm you?" Emily stared at him, speechless. Only after hearing her answer, each question, did William finally release a long breath he seemed to have been holding for hours. The travelers quietly turned away, pretending not to watch. Emily guided him toward the fireplace. His hands were freezing. Without saying anything, she removed his soaked gloves, pulled a chair closer to the flames, and draped a dry blanket over his shoulders. "You rode through all this weather," she whispered. "I thought—" William stopped. His voice failed him. For several moments, only the crackling fire could be heard. Finally, he spoke again. "When my mother died, I convinced myself that caring for people only gave grief another way to find me." He stared into the flames. "When my father followed her, I built walls around everything. Around this estate, around my heart. I believed loneliness was strength." Emily listened without interrupting. "Then you grabbed my ear in the middle of the marketplace." A faint smile touched William's face. "You never treated me like a title. You argued with me, laughed at me, challenged me, and somehow you made this house feel alive again." His expression grew serious once more. "Tonight, riding through that storm, I finally understood something. I wasn't afraid of losing control." His voice became almost a whisper. "I was terrified of losing you before I found the courage to tell you that I love you." Silence settled gently between them. Emily felt tears sting her eyes, yet no grand speech came to her. Instead, she reached for his cold hands. "They're freezing," she said softly. She pulled his chair even closer to the fire. "For someone brave enough to ride through a storm, you're surprisingly foolish." William looked down at their joined hands. Then he laughed. It was not the careful smile Emily had occasionally seen before. It was open, warm, and completely free of the sorrow that had shadowed him for years. For the first time since losing his family, William Harrington no longer looked like a man hiding from life. He looked like a man finally ready to live it. Winter settled gently across Maple Creek, covering the orchards and wheat fields with quiet blankets of snow, yet Harrington Estate had never felt warmer. Every morning smoke curled from the great kitchen chimney before sunrise. Fresh bread rested beside long wooden tables, where servants, stable hands, gardeners, and housemaids now shared breakfast together every Sunday. The laughter that once seemed impossible echoed naturally through hallways that had spent years wrapped in silence. Even Henry Collins admitted he occasionally caught himself smiling for no reason while walking through the house. William Harrington watched these changes with quiet gratitude. He understood that the transformation had not begun with expensive renovations or grand speeches. It had begun the day Emily Carter refused to fear him. As spring approached, William made a decision that surprised the entire county. He would revive the Harrington Spring Banquet, a celebration his mother, Elizabeth Harrington, had hosted every year before her passing. For nearly a decade, no invitations had been sent, no music had filled the ballroom, and no families had crossed the estate's front gates except on business. This year would be different. Emily accepted responsibility for every dessert served that evening. She carefully combined Elizabeth's treasured recipes with several creations of her own, believing memories should be honored without preventing new ones from being made. Apple pies, cinnamon rolls, honey cakes, blackberry tarts, butter biscuits, and warm bread-lined tables decorated with fresh spring flowers gathered from the estate gardens. Several days before the celebration, Emily received a cream-colored envelope sealed with the Harrington family crest. Inside rested a formal invitation, not as a servant, not as the estate baker, as William Harrington's honored guest. Emily stood quietly in her mother's kitchen, reading the invitation twice before believing it was real. She owned no silk gown, no diamonds, no expensive gloves. Margaret Carter, her gentle widowed mother with soft brown eyes, silver beginning to appear among her chestnut hair, and hands roughened by years of sewing to support her children after losing her husband, quietly altered. Emily's favorite pale blue dress laid into the night. Margaret had always believed kindness carried more beauty than wealth, though hardship had often tested that belief. Before Emily left, her mother tucked several fresh white apple blossoms into her hair. "You already have everything worth wearing," Margaret whispered. The ballroom glittered beneath hundreds of candles. Guests from every respected family in the county arrived dressed in elegant coats and sparkling jewelry. The conversation slowed noticeably when Emily entered alone. Whispers floated through the room. "She's only a baker. Surely she shouldn't be standing among us. A pleasant charity case, perhaps?" Emily heard every word. She lifted her chin anyway. Across the ballroom, William heard them as well. Without hesitation, he crossed the room, stopping directly before Emily. He extended his hand. "Would you honor me with the first dance?" The room fell completely silent. Emily accepted. As they stepped onto the polished floor, William spoke softly enough that only she could hear. "Everyone here measures wealth by land, titles, or money." He smiled. "I measure it differently." She looked up. "The greatest treasure in this house isn't something I inherited." His gray eyes never left hers. "It's the woman who had the courage to tell me the truth when everyone else simply stepped aside." The music began. By the end of the first dance, many of the whispers had disappeared. Those who watched closely no longer saw a wealthy landowner's son dancing with a poor baker. They saw two people whose quiet respect for one another had erased every distant society tried to place between them. Several weeks later, William reopened the small private kitchen where Elizabeth Harrington had once taught village children to bake. Rather than preserving it as a museum of grief, he transformed it into the Elizabeth Baking Schoolhouse, where young women from struggling families could learn bread making, pastry baking, and kitchen management entirely free of charge. Emily happily became its first instructor. Watching girls leave each afternoon carrying warm loaves beneath their arms reminded her of the hope she herself had nearly lost after her father's death. With the wages she had earned honestly at Harrington Estate, Emily helped Margaret purchase the little cottage they had rented for years. For the first time since their family's hardest days, her younger brother and sister returned to school without worrying whether tuition could be paid. Early that spring, beneath clear blue skies, William and Emily were married inside Maple Creek Community Church. Emily wore no jewels, only her simple pale blue dress and a bouquet of wildflowers gathered from the estate gardens. A faint dusting of flour still rested along one sleeve because she had insisted on finishing the morning bread before the ceremony. William noticed. "I never fell in love with a lady pretending to be someone else," he whispered before they exchanged vows. "I fell in love with the baker who grabbed my ear in the middle of the marketplace and reminded me to see the people standing right in front of me." Emily laughed through happy tears. That evening, Harrington Estate glowed with warm lights visible across the valley. Music floated from open windows. Children chased one another through gardens filled with blooming apple trees while fresh bread cooled beside wide-open kitchen windows. People later said Emily Carter changed the future of Harrington Estate. Henry Collins believed something even greater had happened. She had reminded an entire household that love did not weaken a heart. Sometimes it simply gave it the courage to beat freely again. Every story eventually comes to an end, but the kindness we choose each day has a way of continuing long after the final page. Perhaps all of us have walked past someone without truly seeing them. Perhaps all of us have also been the person hoping someone would simply notice our quiet struggles. Sometimes the smallest act of courage, an honest word, a helping hand, or an open heart can gently change a life in ways we never expect. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Share in the comments where you're watching from and tell us what part of the story stayed with you the most. If you believe stories like this deserve to reach more people, please share this video with someone who might need a little hope today, and don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming stories. Until we meet again, may God bless you, keep you safe, fill your home with peace, and surround you and your loved ones with His love every single day.